Hi, welcome to this episode of Just Salvos. I'm Major Marion Weymouth from the Territorial Social Justice Department here at Territorial Headquarters, and we're talking today on youth in the city. You may be aware of recent situations that have confronted youth. One was aired on Four Corners just this week, revealing a cluster of youth suicides in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. This report is, among others, about youth unemployment, which is always higher than the general population, disaffected youth in clashes with police, racial tensions, Indigenous suicides, particularly in youth, along with mandatory detention and high representation of youth in this sector, and so on. Well, it's easy to be overwhelmed by the complexity of things which youth face today, and to ignore what's going on and leave the solution to someone else. We all need to understand, however, and today it is hoped that we will be more along that line of engagement and be among those who can do something and offer hope in hopeless situations. Today we've invited Major Brendan Nottle to come and be with us, and Major Brendan has a guest, Lauren, with us here today. And we would like that Brendan enlightens us on the important topic of youth in the city. Welcome, Brendan.
Good morning, Marion.
Good morning. And I'd love you to introduce the fine young lady to your left here.
Yeah, this is Lauren Cockerell, and Lauren is the coordinator of street teams, and she's also oversighting a new initiative that we're commencing called transit teams. And Lauren just does a superb job coordinating, but also being on the streets and working with young people in significant need.
That's fantastic. Brendan, this isn't your first time to sit in this chair, perhaps, and you've been an officer for some years at Melbourne 614 in the city. How long has that been that you've been there?
This is our 10th year.
Your 10th year. Well, tell us something of what you think and believe confronts youth in the city today.
I think one of the really significant issues, not just for youth in the city, but youth across our nation, is this issue of suicide. So on Monday, we focused on World Suicide Prevention Day. And my passionate view is that every single day of the year, particularly here in Australia, needs to be Youth Suicide Prevention Day. And the reason I say that is Lifeline have just released some statistics that indicate that every single day here in Australia, there are 6 young people that take their lives. Every single day, 6 young people take their lives. And there's another 15 unsuccessful attempts that happen each day as well. They're the statistics. That's the raw data. And when you stop and think about, close to 1,800 to 2,000 young people every single year here in Australia taking their lives, we realise we've got an epidemic of suicide. We realise we've got a massive crisis on our hands, and we need to absolutely start to take that issue seriously as the church, and particularly as the Salvation Army.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is alarming news, actually, isn't it? We should have been alarmed about it before. We need to be exposed to that news, and we need to sit up and take notice. I had seen that in Headspace, which is one of the mental health, or the National Youth Mental Health Foundation, is that right? Has found out that the leading cause of death in 15 to 24-year-olds is suicide, in fact, 23%. And that's followed by car accidents at 14%. So there's a big gap there, and this is a huge issue. So I just wanted you to comment, perhaps you and Lauren together, and introduce Lauren. How widespread is this problem? And do you believe that these young people are led to this pathway in some way by what you see there in the city?
Well, it's a significant issue in the city, but the statistics out of Lifeline actually indicate that there are 20% to 30% more attempts made by young people in rural areas. So this is just a massive
where
issue.
you are,
Absolutely. And the reality is that all of us at some stage of our lives are going to be impacted by this issue of suicide. Our churches, our core, our communities are going to be impacted by this issue of suicide. And you stop and think about those 2 articles that appeared in the Melbourne Age just a few months ago that indicated that there was a cluster of suicides that took place in southeast Melbourne, where 12 young people, young men, aged 16 to 17 years of age, took their lives. And they did it all in the same way. They jumped in front of trains, and they were all from 3 schools. And the reality is that this was a pact that was made. The evidence indicates that these young people made a pact to do this. And we start to understand that that was something terrible and awful that impacted those communities in southeast Melbourne. But it's an issue which is having a significant impact on communities all around Melbourne. And it's one of those issues where we need to actually stop and say, actually, I've got to take responsibility for this as well.
Look, I found too that a youth detention report was quoted as saying from a round table that one of the trends is that we're getting more and more young people with multiple needs, with things like mental health issues, intellectual disabilities, drug abuse. And in trying to meet these needs, do you think that facilities and services and systems are geared up to meet those needs?
Well, it's interesting because yesterday in State Parliament here in Victoria, there was a report tabled by the Child Safety Commissioner, Bernie Geary. And in that report, he said there is a really significant breakdown in agencies working together around this issue. So he actually reported to Parliament that agencies are working as silos. And as a result, there's been up to 20 deaths of young people that have occurred that may well have been prevented if agencies work together. And I think when you stop and think about the young people that we see, where we've got our youth bus out on the streets of the city. We've got Lauren doing a fantastic job with street teams, seeing hundreds of young people every Friday and Saturday night. We see over and over and over again that we never ever come across young people that have one issue. If they've got one issue, behind that issue is a whole multitude of complex issues that need to be addressed.
Lauren, could you just paint a picture for us of this scenario, in the city?
Yeah, so we've been running the Youth Street Teams program for almost 2 years now. So it was a pilot program basically to combat some of the alcohol-fueled violence in the City of Melbourne. So City of Melbourne funded the program and they've continued to do so, which is fantastic. Basically, it's a peer-to-peer kind of initiative. So, looking at young people, dealing with young people with these complex needs. So, we've got 20 volunteers that head out every Friday and Saturday night when young people are out and potentially vulnerable. So, we come across a lot of people that are having a great time, for example, but there is a proportion of those people that, for whatever reason, are alcohol, drug affected, come across some trauma throughout the night and just find themselves in a really vulnerable situation. So, whether they're disconnected from their friends or whatever might have happened, the teams are there to support them through that kind of stuff when potentially they're not able to make those kind of, decisions themselves. Yeah.
Is your work then something like the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, or which part of that, how would you describe that work on the street?
Yeah, look, I think we work really strongly with the Victoria Police and the emergency services, security staff and things like that to create a full safety solution. So where we come in, I think, is maybe some of the softer cases, but a lot of liaison with people, seeing how they're going, just asking that question, like, are you okay? How are you going? I think it's not done enough, and people are often surprised that people have taken the time to just go up and say, how are you going? It's not necessarily what's wrong with you, but actually kind of drawing that out as well. So I think asking those really simple questions are really powerful. And yeah, just being observant of people. So if you see someone that's not going okay, it's asking them if they're all right, and then working out different solutions to be able to make sure they're okay. So, in the absence of a friend or whoever it might be that would have taken that place, we can go in and act as that person and get them home safely, or, connect them in with family and friends, and just make sure that when they're really vulnerable or alcohol affected, when all this kind of comes to a head at times, we're actually able to ensure their safety. Yeah. Right.
I think the other interesting thing is the work that Lauren and the other staff and volunteers at 614 do out on the streets is really intervention work. But what we also do back at 69 Burke Street is a lot of prevention work too. So we run something called The Vault. And really what that's about is building meaningful relationships with young people. And that's where some really significant work takes place. The Children's Protection Society here in Australia did a really interesting piece of research a few years ago where they interviewed 1,000 Year 10 students across Australia, and they asked them one question in this piece of research, and that was, what would it take to prevent you from doing something really damaging to yourselves? And 87% of young people responded by saying the interest of a significant other. And we've really picked that up and we've implemented that philosophy, which is really about building meaningful relationships with young people. And I think one of the issues here in Australia, we have a lot of discussion about economic poverty, but I think one of those issues, which is a real epidemic in our society, is social poverty, where particularly a lot of young people don't have access to meaningful relationships and they're facing huge issues, complex issues, often on their own because they don't have the support of family and friends. And we see that we, as workers, but far more profoundly as Christians, have an absolute responsibility to build meaningful relationships with young people and be in it for the long term, not just for a few nights.
Yeah.